Let me begin by letting you know that I am a work in progress. I am someone who brings expertise. I'm a business person. I'm also a scientist, and I hope to offer you some solutions, but I need you to know that I am a work in progress. And the things that I'm about to describe to you are things that I will continue to wrestle with, I think, for the rest of my life. I hope that I do. I can continue to work on this. But let me ask you a question. Let me begin by asking you a question. What would change for you and for others if you were better under pressure? What would change for you and for others if you were better under pressure? Several years ago, an executive named Alex called me. And he called me because he had read my first book. And for some reason, reading my book made him think that he wanted me to come work with he said he had about 100 sales leaders, and they were actually going to be in Texas. I'm from Seattle, and so he said, I'd love to have you come work with my leaders. And so I said, that's great. We set the date, and it was all set. But right about a week before, Alex told me, he gave me a call, and he said, there's a problem. I just quit my job, and so I won't be there when you actually are with my team, but I would love to get to know you anyway. We had probably a 20-minute conversation. He said, I'd love to get to know you a little bit. And so let's get together on Friday night. I know you'll be with them Thursday and Friday, and then Friday evening we can get together. My wife will be out of town, but my two sons are home, and it'd be great to get to know one another. So I went down to Austin, and I had my 2 days with Alex's former team, and then got to Friday night, and I went over to Alex's house. And so I got a chance to get to know his sons a little bit. And I do this strange thing when I travel, and it's that I always pack my swim trunks. And the reason why is that I'm always aware that there may be an opportunity to hot tub. I don't have a hot tub, but my wife isn't interested in a hot tub, but I'm always aware I don't have one, so I think that'd be kind of cool. So at some point over the course of the evening, I thought, Alex is kind of a successful business executive. He's gonna have a hot tub. So I found that moment where I just peeked out through the shades into his backyard. I'm like, what's going on out there? And sure enough, he had the beautiful Austin pool. I'm from Seattle, so this is an amazing scene with the jacuzzi with the waterfall going into the pool. I swear there were deer up on the hillside, like above. It was just this beautiful moment. So then I got to find the moment. So I found the moment and I said, hey, Alex, it's kind of awkward, but I said, I noticed you have a hot tub. I brought my swim trunks, so any chance we could tub? And so he said, like a person with a hot tub would say, sure, okay. So we ended up doing that. We spent 2 or 3 hours. We've been having this amazing conversation about his transition in his job to a new role that he was taking on, and about our families and just careers and life. I need to rewind back to Wednesday. So on that Wednesday, when I was packing my bags, I did something a little bit different because I'd been bothered that the collars of my shirts would slide up underneath the lapel of my jacket. And so I remembered back to my childhood, my dad would get heavily starched shirts. Some of you may not know what that is, but what it means is the shirts come back from the dry cleaner like bricks. They're like cardboard. And I thought, that's the way my collar will stand up straight, if I do that. So I pack my bags, my heavily starched shirts, and my swim trunks, of course, and I head for Austin, Texas. So I go into Thursday, and I get up in the morning. I'm going to work with these sales leaders. I put on my heavily starched shirt. I don't know if you know what heavy starch does to your skin when there's nothing else between the two, but I will tell you, by the end of a full day of doing my consulting thing, my chest was so raw, I thought my nipples were bleeding. I was doing anything I could to just keep my chest away from away from my shirt, and it's all I had. So I go back Thursday night to my hotel room. I have no options. All I have is my swim trunks, and my heavily starched shirts. I got no place to call to get a t-shirt or anything. So I called down to the concierge, and I asked them, like anyone else would do, I said, do you have any Band-Aids? So they said, sure, come on down. So I go down, and I kid you not, all they had was the little circular Band-Aids that go in the Band-Aid box. So I get up Friday morning, and I slap those puppies on, and I put on my heavily starched shirt, and I'm telling you, I had one of the best consulting days of my life. I'm working with these leaders, unbelievable moments. Now fast forward to the hot tub. I've been in this hot tub with my new friend Alex that I barely knew for 2 or 3 hours. talking about leadership and life and career and family with the water line right about here, my arms up on, just getting more and more relaxed. And at some point it occurred to me, did I take those Band-Aids off? And now I got to find my moment. And I look down, and sure enough, I am still wearing Band-Aids with no idea what to do. I didn't know what to do. So the only thing that came to me was to begin to yell. And I said, you have got to be kidding me. We just met each other. We're spending all this time talking about life and family and your job change. And all this time, I've had Band-Aids on my nipples. And this is what he said. I just thought it might have been cool in Seattle. That's the only thing he could think to say. I tell you that ridiculous story, truth for truth, word for word, because of this. If there's something that I have learned about leaders, is that there are two kinds of leaders in our world. And sometimes we think there is one kind of leader. There are those who spend most of their time managing their Band-Aids, with so much care about what other people think about them that they almost can't even function under pressure in high-pressure moments. I call those people, they're peacekeepers. They're people that want peace. They want everyone to be happy and most likely to be happy with them. But there are other leaders who have a very different way of functioning. The leaders who don't realize that there are blemishes and wounds on them, and there's Band-Aids going on, but they don't even know that they're there. Neither of these people are bad people, by the way. But it's one of the reasons that one language and a pithy airport book that says, here's your 3 steps to leading well, will always fall short. Because emotionally, we process pressure very, very differently. And my hope today is to not only give us a description of what pressure is like, but also understand that each of us has a default. A way that we go under pressure, and also to provide you with some strategies that could help you be more effective when that next high-pressure moment comes. Because as I look at all of you today, I know it's coming. If there's one thing I know that next high-pressure moment is upon you in this moment, or it's coming very soon. I have given my life to the development of a generation, as much as I can have any power in this at all, of courageous and sacrificial leaders. Leaders who bring a sense of themselves and enough efficacy to step out and to lead, but also a willingness to sacrifice when necessary. That's been the challenge of everything that I do, everything that my organization does, and it's hard work. And I will tell you, at the center of that investment in whole leaders is a fundamental tension between two things. It's so often this tension between myself and other people. And it's happening all the time. So what does pressure have to, so why am I talking about pressure? What does pressure have to do with it? First of all, what is it? Pressure is an invisible force that tells you that something is changing. An invisible force. It's like when an airplane takes off and you know that the cabin pressure is changing. You can feel it, but you can't see it. And we feel that all the time. And typically that change we experience almost as collisions. Sometimes those collisions are intrapersonal. They're things that are happening within us. You know what I mean? Where you're feeling a fight within you. It's almost like you're wrestling with yourself about something. In some cases, it's an environmental collision where it's a collision between what's happening in your environment and what's happening within you. But most often, leaders experience a collision as interpersonal. A collision between what it is I think is important and what everyone else thinks is important. And I will tell you, those of you who are leaders now, just to normalize this for all of us, and those of you who may aspire to be, there is something fundamentally different that changes when we begin to lead. Because now, the statement, live your truth, is no longer enough. Because as a leader, I'm just telling the real story from the research. As a leader, you now are not only responsible for living your own truth, but being in touch with and connected to the reality and the truth and what matters to everyone else. And I have a lot of conviction about that, because if we deny that, we deny the real experience that leaders have. And pressure, but what's so fascinating about the research around pressure is that when you look at the decades of work, and I've had a chance to be involved in multiple longitudinal studies of leader development, when you look at this decades of research that's out there, one thing is clear. that some of the most profound experiences that change the way a person leads forever are things like a change in scope. You know, I lead either a smaller or a larger business, or I have to deal with a problem person on my team, or I manage people for the first time. The research is clear. That's one of the most powerful moments. Or I go through a serious failure. I fail, or I have a setback. What that research doesn't talk about in as much detail, but it's in between the lines, is every one of these experiences are things that you would not want to experience again. These are high pressure moments. These are the crucible moments that develop leader capacity. So pressure, it's crazy because it's a necessary catalyst for change, for us to become better versions of ourselves, not only for our sake, but also for the sake of other people around us. So what this got the team of researchers I've been involved with over the years really interested in is what's going on in the midst of those pressure moments for every single one of us. And what was fascinating that emerged was that when leaders describe, whether they were parents or presidents, when they described these high pressure moments, the fundamental tension they faced was between how do I stay true to myself? Do you hear me? How do I stay true to myself and at the very same time stay connected to my stakeholders, some of whom may be right directly in conflict with me? How do I do that? I have the benefit of an older brother named Dr. Douglas McKenna, who is my older brother, but also a mentor of mine, who introduced me at the time we were seeing the research into what's called leadership differentiation, a theory of leadership called leadership differentiation, which is all about this. How does a leader maintain their convictions and also stay connected to the convictions of everyone else, all these different stakeholders? How do they do that? And what we found that was consistent with that theory is that each of us have a default. For some of us, we lean toward what I often describe as that peacekeeping. Under pressure, we try to make everyone happy, and everyone happy with us. And others of us default toward just I'm going to speak what I think is important with a disconnectedness to what other people are thinking, needing, and feeling. And when I say a default, what I mean is this. You know when you default on a loan, what do? It means you stop paying. So it means you do nothing. So to default is just to go with our compulsions as opposed to doing something different and showing up in a very different kind of way. So what we discovered is that each one of us has this different way of showing up in those high pressure moments. But I got really interested because it's one thing to say, okay, pressure matters. We have these defaults. What can we do about it? What research could we do to understand how each of us could show up in that next moment? You may have by the way, something in your inbox right now. You can see the subject line, but you don't want to open it because you're like, I don't want to deal with it. I'll lose sleep. I see some of you are laughing because you know what I mean. Or there's a conversation with a loved one or a team member, or suddenly you've been given a whole new business responsibility and unit. These moments are coming, right? So I was interested for myself, like, what do these leaders say? So we ended up studying that for a couple of years. What do they do? And there were 11 strategies that emerged. 11 strategies. Some of the things are not surprising. Things like self-awareness. Not only knowing yourself, but also knowing how other people see you. That's the two sides of that. Seeing the big picture. So being able to step back and take a moment to see what needs to be seen. Focusing on what you can control. These were all strategies, but we were very interested, and they were all important. If I knew the secret sauce, what were the strategies that predicted the most variance in a leader's capacity to show up well under pressure? And you know what they were? The number 1 and 2 strategies. Sense of purpose and focusing on potential. Sense of purpose. This is the extent to which you know why you are there. I had a conversation with a leader a few years back, and I asked her this question. I do weird questions with leaders sometimes. And I said to her, why do you lead? And this was a leader in the aerospace industry. So she was responsible for a business unit that builds airplanes. Why do you lead? And she said, well, I believe in the 10-year vision for the business. And that's why I lead. And so she recited the 10-year vision for the business. I got to tell you, it wasn't a lie, but it wasn't particularly compelling. So I did this weird thing that Rob does sometimes, and I did this. I asked her the same question again. Why do you lead? And she said something interesting after a pause. She said, well, I ended up getting promoted up through the hierarchy of our organization. My husband and I kind of got used to a new standard of living. I was making more money. So I guess that's why. It still wasn't a lie, but it wasn't particularly compelling. So I did something that's even stranger that I do sometimes. I asked her a third time, "Why do you lead?" And at that point, after a moment, she said this. She said, now keep in mind, this is a leader who builds airplanes. She said, "When I was 9 years old, my sister and I built cardboard wings. And we got up on the roof of our house, and I put on the wings, and before I was ready, she pushed me off the roof. I fell to the ground, and I broke my arm." And she said, "Rob, ever since then, I have wanted to help people fly." And I immediately thought, I would follow you anywhere. And I tell you that because purpose is a difficult thing, but it's so necessary for us to excavate. If there's something the last couple of years have shown for the leaders that I have an opportunity to work with, in many ways, the pressure that they have faced has exposed their roots, or more like the lack of their rootedness. There's this giant walnut tree that grows in the front yard of my house, and if you look at it, it has roots that go deep. And what we found in our research was that purpose was a rooting. So one piece of advice I have that I lean into all the time is to ask yourself this question before that phone call, before you open that email, before that conversation. Why are you in it? Not just for your sake, but for the sake of the person you're talking to. And we found that kind of an excavation on purpose, and then maybe ask yourself 2 or 3 times. But the second one was focusing on potential. If there was a number 2 strategy that was contributing more on top of purpose, focusing on potential, the extent to which you were able to identify positive potential outcomes when everyone else may only see barriers. I show my children a picture, I show leaders this picture of a tree across a road, this giant tree. And I thought, I'm going to ask my sons when they were young. I asked one son, I said, "So what do you see?" And he said, "Well, obviously there's a tree in the road." But then he said, "I also could have put a board up that, and if I put a board, I could create a bike jump." And it was interesting. So I asked even my younger son, I think he was 6 or something at the time, and I said, "What do you see when you look at this picture?" And he said, "Well, I see the tree in the road." But he said, "We camp. That's a lot of firewood." And he said, "I also see the road beyond the tree." And I'm telling you that because it was interesting to think about what a focus on potential, which has so much hope in it, right? How that actually centered leaders and allowed them. It wasn't dismissing the problems, by the way. Those problems are still there and they're difficult. But it was in the midst of those barriers, seeing positive potential possibilities. So as you think about the high pressure moments you're facing, and I hope you hear me that I know we are facing them all the time. I know that in a room of people this large, there is something happening for some of you that's going to require you to show up in ways you could not imagine you're going to have to show up. And if I were to give you one piece of advice, I guess it would be to say, realize that these pressure moments are necessary. I don't want to minimize how hard they are. They're necessary for growth. We know that. That lets me be a little objective. And then this is to understand your defaults. And don't assume, don't feel like if some kind of a leadership moment is missing you, it's okay because you have a way of showing up. There's a story there that needs to be understood. And finally is this. My team does this before every meeting with every customer. Every time there's a high pressure moment, we ask ourselves this. Why are we here for them? And if we are to lead well through this and show up as our best selves, what's the positive potential outcome that could emerge? Because I want to offer you this. Our presence in these moments matters just as much as anything we say. The way we show up can have an exponential impact on the experience of every other person. And so that's my hope, is that we would be able to do that, not, as I said before, not just for our own sake, but for the sake of everyone within our sphere of influence. Thank you.